there's been a lot more awareness in our society in recent years about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. And we want to talk about that because you probably know somebody or maybe yourself have been struggling with some trauma in your life. So we're here in the studio with Dr. David Johnson, who is a clinical psychologist. And David, tell us a little bit about PTSD, but we want to uncover these myths and see what truth there might be in them. And so where would you start that conversation with your clients?
Yeah. So I used to work for the VA with military veterans, and I now work just with civilians. But I get a lot of folks come into my office, and I start to ask them about their lives and about traumatic events. And there's a real common reaction, which is, well, I had trauma, but it's not as bad as fill in the blank. And
somebody heard a story of somebody else.
Yeah, because I didn't go to war, so how could I have PTSD? Because I just thought it was for military veterans, or related to sexual assault. I didn't have childhood sexual abuse. It was just a date rape. But it doesn't matter how many times, it's the perception. So each myth, there is some truth in a myth. And the main truth here to know is that there is a correlation. So the more frequently you're exposed to trauma and the more severe it is, the more likely you have PTSD. But that does not discount that anyone can have PTSD related to trauma, whether it was one time or 50. And the reason is because of the perception. The experience of powerlessness, the perception of being trapped and out of control, especially interpersonal traumas, things like sexual assault and physical assault. There's a higher correlation of PTSD than, say, after a natural disaster, because that trauma was inflicted upon me by another human being, and I have to deal with human beings all the time. So it can have a pervasive effect, but it's very important to know that PTSD can affect anyone of all walks of life, no matter how much trauma or how little you've been through.
So it's probably important for a person not to just discount their experience, and just to sort of invalidate their own experience.
Exactly.
So, but some people, so you mentioned the difference in all the sort of spectrum of differences, and each person's experience is somewhat different. And so, is PTSD always associated with a traumatic event in someone's life?
Right, good question. And that brings us to myth 2. Myth 2 is that the only experience people have after trauma is PTSD. The truth is, one, we're very resilient as creatures, so we survive and we thrive. And the majority of people who go through trauma do come out, and maybe there's impacts, but they go on to live very successful, fulfilling, healthy lives. But there is a portion of people who are affected by PTSD, but what's not known is that trauma can cause other effects. It can cause substance use disorders, eating disorders, mood disorders like depression, or even triggering things like bipolar disorder, and even schizophrenia, because that serious impact can trigger some predispositions to other genetic illnesses.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. So there's a lot of other things that, as a therapist, you might be looking for to help someone, rather than just this one narrowly focused. It's important, but there's other things too.
And probably the key link there is emotional avoidance. So trauma is so emotional, so horrific, and causes such a disruption in our emotional world that then people have a tendency to want to avoid any reminder of that. And the way they might do it might be overeating or undereating. It could be through using substances to numb. It could be through depression, just avoiding the rest of life. So as we know, it can manifest as PTSD with nightmares, but it can also manifest as a lot of other issues.
So that's a very challenging issue or set of issues in people's lives. So what kind of hope is there for help? Can people really get better?
Right, and that's our third myth, is that PTSD is a terminal prognosis and it's poor, and you're not going to function the rest of your life. That's not true. The truth is that untreated PTSD can seriously diminish a person's well-being, their functioning, their coping with an illness. It'd be like if you had diabetes that was untreated, you're trying to live your life
Right.
and you're struggling. But just like diabetes, PTSD is manageable, and there are good treatments. In fact, there's 2 scientifically based treatments that I do. One's called prolonged exposure and cognitive processing therapy. And they teach you a set of skills for how to manage the emotions, how to deal with the memories, and really how to make meaning and help overcome the effects of that trauma in your life.
Okay, that's so helpful. So just one last thing, and for those who are watching today, give us a sense if they have experienced trauma or have someone in their life who's experienced trauma. What's a very simple next step they could take?
Yeah, if you do think that you may have undiagnosed PTSD, I think seeing a mental health professional to get diagnosed, learning more information, there's the ptsd.va.gov.
Okay.
It's a wonderful website, it's the National Center for PTSD. So learn more about it, and certainly just if you're a friend, offering a caring ear and a listening ear, and not being somebody who rejects that person for what they may have been through.
Yeah, that's really, really helpful. So hopefully this is helpful for you to help you get a framework of how to think about these challenging issues. And the more we talk about it, the more we realize that there's so many people in our society who have been affected. So hopefully you're equipped, and we encourage you to take a look at the questions below, and maybe there's some conversations that they could help you have about this subject. Thanks for watching today.